know you could be Batman!
I am not Batman. I'm Batman.
If a monkey hoarded more bananas than it could eat while most of the other monkeys starved, scientists would study that monkey to figure out what the heck was wrong with it. When humans do it, we put them on the cover of Forbes. Capitalism is based on the ridiculous notion that you can enjoy limitless growth in a closed, finite system. In biology, such behavior of cells is called cancer. Workers lost $3.7 trillion in earnings during the pandemic. Women and Gen Z saw the biggest losses. World's billionaires get richer by $3.9 trillion during the pandemic. You know, I'm not great at math, but I'm starting to connect the dots here. Why are ethics questions always like, is it ethical to steal bread to feed your starving family, and not, is it ethical to hoard bread while families are starving? My ability to dissociate has become too powerful. Now I'm just watching the fall of America like, yeah, that happens to empires, while looking for dog hats on Amazon. According to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, it would cost $20 billion to end homelessness in the United States. Breaking news. The U.S. House of Representatives is set to vote next week on $17.6 billion in aid to Israel. Interesting. First ever space hotel is slated to be operational by 2027. We literally just want healthcare. Evangelicals will start describing what heaven is like, and it's just a socialist society. You watch The Hunger Games, sided with the resistance. You watch Divergent, sided with the resistance. You watched Attack on the Titan, sided with the resistance. You read about history, you side with the resistance. When it's fiction or history, you understand oppression. Why do you refuse to see it when it's reality? It's fun that some folks think there's a secret group of rich people who control everything instead of the widely known group of rich people that control everything. Do you work well under pressure? Needs the response, is this job one that regularly engages in actual emergencies like an ER or fire department? Or do you fabricate urgency through poor management, uneven distribution of duties, and an inflated sense of self for upper management? 8 guys in this country have more money than 4 billion people combined. But yeah, the mom buying groceries with food stamps is the problem. If you think fertilized eggs are people, but parents who've crossed the oceans with their kids aren't, stop pretending your concerns are religious. This is literally how discussing politics today feels like. I don't know how to explain to you that you should care about other people.
I am very eager and almost desperate to share my experience as a trans bride, largely because almost all wedding content is just very not trans, you know? And a lot of super viral trans bride content is like centered around shock value. Like you'll see all of these beautiful passing trans feminine models in their wedding dresses, and the response is overwhelmingly like, oh my god, I can't believe they're trans. And that like shock is what pushes those videos out to the masses. And look, I am so happy for those brides, but it is a lot harder to find queer wedding content that's centered around love, let alone trans wedding content. My partner and I are both trans and non-binary, so it's really easy to feel ostracized from wedding culture when we never see ourselves represented in like media and weddings or like in pamphlets at wedding expos. And we really have to consider how vendors will handle our identity. Like I'm really used to getting nasty stares and just like misguided comments whenever I leave the house. That is just an unfortunate reality that I've had to learn how to deal with. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm already like bracing as we start this process. I'm just like waiting for someone to say, so who's the bride? Like I hear it in my head, like it's already happening. This journey in planning our wedding is just so sacred and I want to protect it as much as I can. And I'm still trying to figure out how, because the truth is you can't control what people say or do, especially when they're selling you something. So we've set the intention to work with as many trans and queer owned businesses as possible. And otherwise we have to to ask these venues and vendors, like, straight up, my partner and I are both trans, like, will that be a problem? Which is stressful. Like, I've gotten a lot better at it, but confrontation is not my strong suit, especially with strangers. Now look, this is an added worry that I carry with me in almost all areas of my life, except for in my relationship with Ezra. My relationship with Ezra is just so sacred. It is so safe. And I'm going to work as hard as I have to make this wedding as safe as our love feels. I am committed to flooding your feed with trans wedding content, so all the trans couples out there can see that it is accessible and that we are not alone. And so that everyone else can see that this is what a bride looks like. I'm so excited to share this journey with you all. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I'm happy to answer them. I love you.
Did you know that Native Americans were directly mentioned by one of the founding fathers of Zionism? In his 1923 essay, The Iron Wall, Zev Jabotinsky argued that the only way to successfully colonize Palestine was through brute military force. He referenced what happened to indigenous people here in the Americas as an example. He writes, "My readers have a general idea of the history of colonization in other countries. The native populations, civilized or uncivilized, have always stubbornly resisted the colonists, irrespective of whether they were civilized or savage. And it made no difference whether the colonists behaved decently or not. The Pilgrim Fathers, the first real pioneers of North America, were people of the highest morality who did not want to harm anyone, least of all the Red Indians, and they honestly believed that there was room enough in the prairies for both the paleface and the redskin. Yet the native population fought with the same ferocity against the good colonists as against the bad. This is equally true of the Arabs. We may tell them whatever we like about the innocence of our aims, watering them down and sweetening them with honeyed words to make them more palatable, but they know what we want as well as we know what they do not want. They feel at least the same instinctive, jealous love of Palestine as the old Aztecs felt for ancient Mexico and the Sioux for their rolling prairies. The one thing I want to point out is that in 1923, one of the founding fathers of Zionism is labeling himself and the Project of Israel as colonizers. He is referring to Palestinians as the natives of the area, comparing them to the indigenous people of the Americas. He also is glorifying the Pilgrim Fathers of the Americas, painting them as absolute saints and basically applauding how effectively they were able to slaughter and murder us and steal our land. So I genuinely want to know, how is a movement going to go from applauding and fawning over our murderers to suddenly wanting to steal our identity and claim indigeneity to the area in order to more effectively carry out the same levels of violence and genocide that happened here? Unfortunately for them, Palestinians and Native Americans are similar in many ways, including our resilience and our fighting spirit. Despite every genocidal act that the wholesome Pilgrim Fathers committed over the past 500 years, natives are still here. Our languages are still here, our cultures are still here, we still have our identity, and if we can survive that long of fierce, brutal colonization, I know that Palestinians will do the same. I highly encourage all of you to look up the essay, The Iron Wall, thoroughly read it so you can fully understand how deep this history goes, and you can see the parallels for what they truly are, blatantly obvious. And to my fellow natives on here, educate yourself on this so that you can educate your family, your friends, your tribal leadership. We need to boldly and loudly push back against this weaponization and bastardization of what it means to be indigenous, especially with the opening of the Indigenous Embassy in Jerusalem on February 4th. The embassy's goal is to, quote, change anti-Israel narrative among native peoples. They're realizing that indigenous solidarity with Palestine worldwide is becoming a problem, and they're trying so hard to undermine that. Do not let them appeal to and use our own people in order to do that. Because, as Zev Jabotinsky himself said, Palestinian struggle and the Native American struggle are parallel and intertwined. And it doesn't matter how many embassies are open, how many bribes are given, how much propaganda is spewed, you cannot erase that bond between Palestinians and indigenous people.
Yesterday, Georgia heard Senate Bill 88 in committee, a bill that would write policies that would force transgender students out to their parents. But here's the kicker. During the bill hearing, they only let people who supported the bill speak. That's despite most of the people being there to speak out against the bill. I want you to watch this video.
Since we've had a few hearings on this is the second one I think I may have heard. Yeah. Fourth. Okay, but the second one that I sit and intensely listened to. But since other people are here in line who didn't speak, can I just get a show of hands of who's against this bill? Oh my God. Okay.
So we're not taking any testimony?
Now, I have watched many anti-trans hearings before, and Many times they do undemocratic actions. For instance, sometimes they will make it so that nobody gets to speak. Sometimes they'll try to make it so that one person speaks for and one person speaks against, even though 100 people are there to speak against the bill and only one is there to speak for the bill. But I have never seen them only allow people who support the bill to speak. If this is what it takes to get anti-trans bills across, if this is what it takes to make these senators feel better about what they're doing, that should say a lot about how popular their positions are.
How close do you think we are to a revolution in the US? You don't think it would happen? I actually think it's like inevitable unless there's massive policy change. We're getting closer every day. Yeah, you're right. It would be catastrophic. There would be a ton of loss and most people are not ready for it. For it to be successful, people would need to start preparing now to get ahead of it. Oh, I definitely am. Yeah, I'm in the process of getting off the grid and learning how to be self-reliant. I mean, if it does happen, there's going to be more deaths due to hunger than the combat itself. Well, organizing collective action would be almost impossible, right? Because the moment it gets any momentum, it's going to be shut down. No, I mean like they would shut down the communication systems entirely and enforce lockdowns and ban weapons. I mean, any communication systems that are still functioning would be incredibly risky to use. It's probably better to just avoid it. Oh yeah, if the group is too small or too close together, it's going to be shut down by any means necessary. Infiltration's a huge concern. The feds are going to have no problem posing as one of us. Yeah, I mean, ideally, people would find their small groups before this happened, and it would be their neighbors, the people that they're going to have to rely on to survive anyway. It'll be incredibly difficult, but not impossible. If some real progress is made, U.S. foreign adversaries would definitely take notice and very likely provide weapons, supplies, and funding. The first hit would probably have to be a massive bank run, and people would exchange their USD for tradable goods, and then stop working, stop purchasing, stop paying taxes, like completely shut down the economy. After that, it's time for guerrilla warfare. That's actually exactly why it's effective, because there's no centralized command, there wouldn't be one leader to target. So instead, it's the already established groups going out and taking down infrastructure, think like bridges and power lines, and building blockades. Well, it actually gets worse at that point because then the rebels are labeled as domestic terrorists and the military is enacted against them. Hopefully there's enough military personnel on the rebel side that if there was a planned attack, they could give some kind of warning to evacuate, but it's really likely that the soldiers would be given a false narrative so that they might carry out orders that they would otherwise question. It would probably be a weapon of mass destruction on a city to be used as an example to elicit fear. And they're probably going to blame the attack on the rebels because they want the narrative to be that the rebels are violent and disorganized, right? Oh yeah, there would definitely be riots, and the attack would be used as an excuse to mobilize troops on the ground and start violently enforcing the lockdowns in the name of safety. It's not really that simple though, because at this point the government would make some performative improvements. Think like stimulus checks. They want you to simultaneously be fearing for your own life and your family's life, while also making it seem like the government has your best interests in mind. Right? The rebels are the problem. They'll be hoping that people will opt for slightly improved conditions rather than fight for true freedom, and most people will probably lose their resolve. Oh yeah, the time for that will come, but a rebel attack would need to be incredibly strategic, probably targeting multiple oppressors at once. And they would likely have to rely on foreign adversaries to provide intel to do it, but then you have to exercise extreme caution because a Fed could easily pose as one of those foreign agents and lead you right into a trap. Exactly, and word would spread fast, so a lot of the oppressors would be heading for bunkers. A secondary attack could be waiting there, but it would be incredibly risky, and you should not underestimate the kind of security that the oppressors would have in place. Oh yeah, I mean, if the attack is successful, they should definitely raid for supplies, look for any intel, and secure any bunkers that they can. I really wish I believed that it would be over quick, but I think they're going to try to drag it out as long as possible because at this point, survival is going to be really hard. So every day that passes, the herd is thinning itself. It's a war of attrition. No, NATO will not get involved. Yeah, the entire world will be watching and planning what to do if the rebels succeed and there's a power vacuum. What? No, this has nothing to do with January 6th.
Hey, did you notice that winter didn't really happen this year? There's even a new term for it called lost winter. For the Midwest, this is the warmest winter ever recorded. Ever. It was so warm in Wisconsin that they've had their first ever tornado in the month of February. Even the Great Lakes are at record low ice coverage, which is bad for so many reasons that it could be the subject of its very own video. I'm sorry this is a bummer of a video, but I think this stuff is important to talk about and it's not getting a lot of news coverage. But right now in our lifetimes, we're entering the reality where winter is starting to become a thing of the past. Like 20 or 30 years ago, if you said that winter would just kind of cease to exist in our lifetimes, people would have thought you were being crazy or ridiculous. And now that it's happening, people don't really seem to care, or they're just like, hey, it's kind of nice out in February, that's cool. Like right now, Canada is experiencing something called zombie fires, where wildfires are continuing to rage beneath snowfall, and they're now having snowstorms that smell like smoke. And these zombie wildfires are seen as a precursor of a bad wildfire season, and Canada just had its worst wildfire season last year. And these alpine forests in British Columbia are absolutely massive, and they hold a ton of carbon, and now they're going up in flames more and more every year. So yeah, the weather in February is kind of nice this year, but it's also a prelude to kind of an infinite summer that just gets hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter every year.